Welcome to the Draknek Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Alan, the head Draknek at Draknek Friends, and today I'm joined by Dan Pearson, who has just joined Draknek as our new head of marketing. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. Yeah, it's new year, new start, all that. It's nice to be here.
Great. Can you start out by giving us an overview of your career in video games?
Absolutely, yeah. I will give you the bits I remember at least. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. I joined the industry in November 2006, and I was doing such a soul-destroying temp work job that I literally just started Googling dream jobs on my lunch break as a way to try to alleviate the encroaching horror. So I just sat down one lunchtime and just Googled video games journalist, and the top result popped up with an open vacancy that had been posted 2 days before. I was living in Brighton. I'd moved down there about sort of 6 months ago, and this was in Brighton. So it really felt just like divine providence, to be honest. It was incredibly lucky.
Nice.
That job was working with Eurogamer, and it was, bottom of the ladder. It was literally just doing admin stuff. It was writing captions for screenshots and doing a lot of CMS stuff. But it was fantastic. I was there for 11 years in the end.
Nice. And when you joined, what were the games that you were playing at the time that made video game journalist the dream job?
So at that point, I was, what we're thinking about, 2005. So this was pre-Xbox, I think, right? Certainly pre-iPhone. I was probably playing still quite a lot of first-person dungeon crawlers on PC, probably. I think I'd had a bit of a gap from games, actually, sort of, I guess, over the period of time where I'd been post-uni. So, yeah, I'd sort of come back into it a little bit. I had, again, in that same sort of job that I really despised, I had ended up coming across ASCII gaming and playing quite a lot of a game called Slash'em, which stands for, it was NetHack Slash'em, super lots of added stuff, hack, extra magic. And because it was all done in ASCII, it basically looked like a spreadsheet to anyone who didn't really know what they were looking at. So I got away with basically sitting and playing that pretty much constantly in this horrible job where I was supposed to be cold calling people and trying to get them to buy computers from the government. And it really, I don't know, it really kind of accentuated the things that I love about games, because, there's this incredibly basic looking thing that's just a load of alphanumeric characters essentially, but just crafting this entire world. And it was, it's free to download. It is essentially endless. It is incredibly complex, and there's so much depth to it, so much to learn. And that really kind of just reignited a lot of what I love about games, because I think I'd started to get a bit disenfranchised by big shiny graphics and essentially just shooting people in the face for no reason. And that, it really kind of rediscovered it. Also, rediscovered my joy of playing games while I was working. So then able to finagle that into a career somehow.
Cool. And you're a gamer 11 years. That's quite a while.
Yeah, it was a really nice place to work. It was family run. I'm still friends with a lot of the folks I met there. Rupert, the ex-owner, is still a really good friend of mine. And a really nice place. It had a real kind of cottage industry sort of vibe when we first started, or when I first started there. It was 5 of us, I think, working out of Rupert's parents' conservatory. His mum literally used to bring around trays of tea and biscuits, bless her. And that's where that whole, empire started. He'd been doing it since he was 16. I think he was 18 when I joined, maybe a little bit older than that, 22. And he turned it into a multinational sort of media conglomeration, sort of one of the best respected companies in the business. So it was a really, really lovely time to be there. There was a lot of very talented people there as well. Worked with some fantastic writers and people from other parts of the business. So I was on Eurogamer for about 4 or 5 years, and then I switched over to gamesindustry.biz, which is the B2B publication there. And I was a bit reticent about that at first because I thought, well, I've got my dream job. I'm literally being paid to play video games. And then, they said, well, do you want to go and work on shops and financial reports and that sort of thing instead? And I thought, well, not really, but it's something new at least. So I did take that on, and I absolutely loved that. I think that was probably the highlight of my time there, actually working on GI, because I was being sent all over the world, meeting many of my childhood heroes, still getting to play games, but not having to write the reviews for them. So I didn't ever have to look a dev in the eye after I told them the game was awful. So yeah, that was a really, really, really great time. A fantastic sort of 11 years there. I look back on it with a lot of fondness.
And then you took the time-honored jump from video game journalism to video game development.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. For the time-honored reason of I need to pay my mortgage as well. Video game journalism certainly you didn't used to, and I'm pretty sure it still doesn't make you a rich man. So having been doing that for a while, and I'd sort of, I'd become editor-in-chief at GI, I had basically the best job doing what I could do, doing what I did that was possible. So my old colleague Phil Elliott, who was working at Square Enix at the time, got in touch and just said, we're looking for someone here who I think you'd be a good fit for. And that was it. Yeah, after 11 years, I moved on and went to work at Square. That didn't last that long. I was only there 6 months. I don't think anyone ever really worked out what the job I was supposed to be doing was, me included. Technically, it was a business development or internal business editor. That's right. It was an interesting job. I was sort of there as a peacekeeper between some people in the company and sort of occasionally writing a slightly sort of antediluvian and unuseful report for people. But it was the trigger I needed to kind of get out and into the other side. So I'm very grateful to Phil and Square for that. And it was a really interesting 6 months as well. Working in a gigantic international publisher like that was certainly very eye-opening, coming from the side of the business that I'd had before. So yeah, it was an interesting time. It didn't last that long. And then after that, I went to work for a law firm briefly, a chap called Jazz Purewell, who had been our in-house kind of lawyer at Eurogamer. I'm not in-house; he was our consultant lawyer. I got to know him well there, and I spoke to him, and he said, "Oh, we're actually looking for a business developer to come and join the firm that he ran." So they worked very closely with people like Facepunch and people like No More Robots and a few others. And my job there was to basically help out with Facepunch things primarily. Helped with the porting project of getting Rust onto console and building a merchandise program for them, and a few other things. So again, a complete sort of left turn, a new start, and that was also a very rewarding couple of years actually. Some really nice folks there who have all gone on to be very influential in the world of games law. I think Jazz has now retired at a sickeningly young age, having sold his firm to a bigger law firm, and I'm very, very happy for him. Bless him, he's a good man. But yeah, that was an interesting 2 years. That also ended in my my first and currently most benevolent redundancy in the games industry, when that company did get bought out by a bigger firm.
It's a kind of weird job. You're working for a legal firm, but that legal firm is kind of offering your services up to do not really legal work.
Yes,
like basically being an external biz dev person.
Yeah. General dog's body, biz dev, someone picking up the rest of it. It was interesting because I obviously introduced myself as working at Purewell and Partners, and always followed that up with I am not a lawyer. Right? It's almost like a mandatory legal requirement to point out that you are not able to give legal advice. Really interesting kind of way to combine those businesses. I think. I mean, Jazz is a very smart guy and very much an entrepreneur. He was, and I think still is. He may not be anymore. He was also the chairman of Facepunch, so he had a sort of business interest there as well as being their counsel and as well as doing a few other things for them. So yeah, it was very interesting. And then when that was acquired, they didn't need me in that role in this much bigger firm. So he gave me a very generous redundancy payment, and moved on to start my own consultancy after that. Actually, that's when I first founded my sort of one-person marketing and comms consultancy, and was doing a few bits of odd work for various other places. Did some work for Eve Online and a few other publishers, and then ended up working for a US company called Genvid, who had created a kind of bespoke proprietary tech for mass interactions on video streams, which I thought was really a kind of fun idea. Basically, the plan was that you would be able to stream any kind of video content, and people would be able to interact with it directly, in a mass audience, whether that's on mobile or on a platform like Facebook, or whether just through a browser, or even just through consoles eventually. Some really interesting ideas, really interesting tech, and I was signed on there as a product marketing manager. So again, a completely different job from anything I'd done before. He said, "Don't worry, I know it's got marketing in the title, but you won't actually have to do any marketing." Plot twist: it was a lot of marketing, understandably, because it was a marketing job. So the first thing there was trying to kind of create a community for this. This software development kit, which enabled this kind of interactivity, and it was a tough sell because nobody had done it. Right, we were trying to persuade people to essentially design a game around this particular form of interaction, and we weren't able to offer them any kind of guarantees or even examples about how well things are done. So they ended up pivoting to becoming a publisher business and licensing IP from various other places and creating these experiences themselves or with external partners. So they did a few things along those lines. They did a thing called Rival Peak, which was a kind of sort of 24/7 live service Facebook game that was emulating a reality TV show, like a Survivors kind of thing, where you had a sort of 12 or 16 kind of characters who would walk around this island, and you could just check in on them any time, see what they were doing. You could interact with them by pushing them towards certain jobs or finding out what they were thinking about, and then each week there would be community votes on particular plot points. There was a TV show as well that was kind of produced weekly, that had updates about everything that had been happening. It was really kind of high quality. It had Will Wheaton on it, who presented it. Really high-end kind of project. But again, it struggled a little bit, which was a bit of a shame. And then they went on to do various other things with Marvel and Walking Dead as well. So they're still going. They downsized considerably. They had a huge amount of investment, and then sort of had to shrink their staff a bit. So that was redundancy number 2. And yes, that a American corporate redundancy is a very different experience from a friendly, generous redundancy from a personal friend. That was brutal. That was weekly catch up with my boss, the head of marketing there. 3 minutes of conversation, utterly unaware. How you doing? Yeah, good. Yeah, how was your weekend? Yeah, really nice actually. Hang out with the kids. Have you seen this? Have you watched this on TV? Great. Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is HR. I'm see you later. And that was it. And by the end of the call, they'd already cut off all my access to Slack and email and everything like that. So that was a bit of a shock, particularly after I'd kind of been lulled into a false sense of security by the first one. So after that, I then went on to work, did a bit more consultancy and sort of odd job stuff for a while. Got hired as a consultant by a company called RCP, Remote Control Productions in Munich, who's the head of whom I've known for a long time, friends with for a while, Hendrik Lesser. So started working for him, and then he sort of took me on full time after being a consultant there, and was their head of communications basically. So again, a really kind of unusual structure for a company there. They've got a central kind of production house which provides a few services, finance and HR and various other things, and then they have a family of about 16 indie studios who are all kind of part of the same company, who vertically integrated and get to use the services from everyone, and it's a nice kind of self-supporting sort of model. So that was a fun 2 years because there was always something new to work on there as well. Different teams doing different games. Managed a couple of relatively major launches when we were there for the company. but then there was a lot of pressure on a couple of projects, and like everybody last year, they were, or in 2024, they were really struggling and had to make some more redundancies. So that was redundancy number 3, and that was in the middle, basically. It wasn't the American first up against the wall kind of scenario, but it wasn't quite as fluffy as the first one. But there's no hard feelings about that. And then I sort of spent a couple of months back on consultancy, and then ended up working for a company called Cyber Temple, which is a brand new kind of Kazakh studio. They are run by a guy who used to be in finance over there and had the dream of making the game that he'd always imagined from his childhood, which was called Dark Switch, which was a nice little city builder sort of set in a tree. So it's all kind of vertical, space saving, and some really nice mechanics in that, which is, I think, still due to come out in March this year. And that was a fun little project, really enthusiastic, fresh new team. But they essentially sort of over budgeted, ran out of money. Classic story. There were a couple of delays. It was supposed to come out in November last year, and then was delayed, and then was delayed again. So they just ran out of runway a bit and had to shrink. So I was there as a consultant, and then I sort of wended my way to your door via Mary reaching out to me through increasingly sort of desperate LinkedIn post of mine, basically.
Well, I think Callum Underwood recommended you.
Yes, the one person in the industry that literally everybody knows and also likes. So, usually, if you're universally known, you're certainly not universally loved. But he manages to ride that line. Bless him. He's a very good guy.
And now you're here. Draknek's gonna start taking off to stratospheric heights.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to be front and center of the Game Awards.
Billboards everywhere.
Yeah. I've already bought all of the buses in London, so yeah, we're on for a good start.
Great. And as the marketing person, you've advised me that spending all of our money on London bus billboards is a sensible investment.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think that, and maybe the back of cigarette packets. I feel like that's a really growth market. Some of the pictures they have on there are really depressing, and I think, perhaps those people could just do with cheering up with a nice little bright, colourful puzzle game instead of a picture of some diseased lungs,
Excellent. But yeah, what appealed to you about working for Draknek?
I mean, I have always loved puzzle games, and I really wanted to come back and work for a company where I felt like I was, contributing directly rather than being sort of an anonymous cog in the machine. I've always preferred working with smaller teams, particularly teams that are kind of passion driven and that have found their niche. Right? I think if you find a company that is working in a relatively narrow niche and doing well and having a good time, then you found a very happy group of people, I think. Because generally, if you're into something like that and you manage to succeed in it, you're doing a good job. So I'd not actually played. I think I'd seen Locke the book in a bookshop before, but not played it.
Oh wow! Actually out in the real world.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I didn't realize this until after I played the digital version. But I remember seeing it, I think, on a counter in Waterstones, actually.
Wow!
And picking it up and thinking, wow, that's really interesting. That would work really well as a game. I wonder why they've made it as a book. Oh well, no need to think about that. I'm sure someone will deal with it, and you did. So well done for that. But yeah, I really like working with small teams, small passionate teams. And as soon as I spoke to Mary on a call, I was like, yeah, I think these are the guys. And having met all of you since, I'm still pretty confident in that. So yeah, it's been really lovely so far. And the timing factor works out for me. The fact that it's kind of not a 40-hour-a-week job as well is nice. That gives me some time to get on with other things. So yeah, it's a really lovely balance for me, and I'm finding it very inspiring so far. It's chipping away at the old facade of grumpy.
The cynicism
20-year veteran
is wearing away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel polished and refreshed.
Oh, amazing! I mean, it probably helps that we've just had a 2-week holiday break, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah, worked for 2 weeks, take 2 weeks off. I'd love for that pattern to continue. If that's something we can
No comment.
discuss. I think big companies now pushing 4-day weeks. Why don't we just push a 2-week month? I think that's the next step in employee rights and
Yeah.
empowerment. To be honest.
I mean, we've not spoken a lot on the podcast about this, but like, yeah, basically everyone at Draknek works part-time hours, equivalent to like 18 hours a week, and that's both on the publishing team and also when we're making a game, we tend to have that structure for the people making our games as well. And like we could do like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off with like a 40-hour week, but that would be so much more draining, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is a very nice. It's a nicely kind of compartmentalized way to work, and I know obviously you do more hours than the rest of us, so you don't actually get the benefits that you're able to
No, I mean
offer us.
it's my company, so it's kind of is just this all-consuming thing.
Mm.
I take weekends, which it's not always been the case, but
Yeah.
no, and I do still work the 4-day week, like Saturday through Monday. I try to not think about work stuff as much as possible, but yeah, I've not managed to squeeze in everything I need to do into 18 hours a week, unfortunately.
No. Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, it's good that somebody's working those hours basically, so that there is always someone at the pumps. But yeah, I really admire the kind of the business model that you've set up. Really, the focus on sustainability rather than the ridiculous kind of growth figures that we've all been exposed to working in the industry, right? This expectations of consistent and constant exponential growth that just don't make any sense at all. So someone focusing on sustainability and keeping the company going, again, like I say, particularly with finding that niche, I think is so refreshing. It's really good to. We often talk about games being a sort of passion-led industry, right? But I think the reality is actually most people after a couple of years, they're not generally passion-driven in the industry, and it's really nice to find a team who still is.
Awesome. Yeah. Any like other than all those nice things, like anything you want to comment about like what's it actually like to work here?
Yeah, all of the emails come in like a sliding block puzzle format, which is really annoying. Just
you
a
have
random
to solve
list
a
of
Wordle
words
to get into the Slack client.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, constant IQ tests. Otherwise, if you're unable to solve a cipher by 9 a.m., then yeah, you're not getting paid for that week. But other than that, yeah, it's really great.
Got to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to keep us sharp, But yeah, I think I really, really am enjoying it so far. I don't think there's anything that's sort of taken me unawares. Like I say, working with a team of people who like each other and are very likable is a huge boon for me. I think if you're going to be spending half your waking hours doing something, you may as well be doing it with people that you respect and admire. So that's a nice thing. I'm not going to name the companies where I've not been able to do that. That would be churlish and petty of me. But there have been some, definitely. So yeah, it's a really friendly, welcoming place where everyone's pulling in the same direction. There's no egos, there's no defensiveness or territorialism at all. It's just people mucking in and doing something that they love and doing it well. So yeah, big fan so far.
Awesome. And yeah, you mentioned that you've always liked puzzle games. Are there any that you want to like call out and like chat about, like particularly like ones and why you like them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, big one for me last year, like everyone was Blueprints, and that that structure I really love. That kind of, what's the word for it? That kind of almost like fractal topography of it. Of you walk into a room and you're like, okay, there's a chessboard puzzle, for example. I've got to solve that, and then you're like, oh, but there are chess pieces over there as well, and that's related. Oh, and these pictures on the walls, those are a bit strange, and you gradually feel yourself almost like that kind of fever dream kind of thing of starting to connect all this stuff, and literally did get into my dreams as well. I think I love that kind of consumption of a new world. That feeling of being in a kind of giant digital kind of escape room. I really, really like that. I love physical escape rooms as well. So that was a kind of the closest I feel like I've found to that sort of experience. So really, really, really enjoyed that. I didn't play that many puzzle games last year, actually, and I struggled a little bit to fill my list of nominations for Game of the Year. But I think historically, I've absolutely got lost in The Witness as well. That was another one that really got into my dreams. I was seeing those grid patterns absolutely everywhere. It was when I was much younger and played a lot of Tony Hawk's, and you'd walk down the street and just be seeing skate lines across bus tops and buildings and things. It was like that with The Witness. Anything that had a vague grid pattern to it, I was like, oh, maybe if I stand slightly at different angles to this, barbed wire fence, then something magical will appear. So really enjoyed that. That's I think one of my favorites. Really liked Talos Principles 1 and 2 as well. I think they're both really nice teams too, which is good. I've spent reasonable amount of time at Reboot in Croatia and got to know a lot of those local devs, and the guys who made Talos Principle were generally very good eggs.
So lots of the first person puzzle games then.
Yeah, I guess those are the kind of the ones I remember more, because they were the sort of big ticket ones I sort of played on a TV or a PC, right? And played a lot of other stuff on mobile as well. I always have at least one of those kind of Rusty Lake style escape the room games on the go. Back in the day, would sit and play the very early kind of flash game escape the room games, that sort of thing. I think the first time I played Sokoban was actually in that game Slash'em that I mentioned. There's a whole side thing in there where you can, in one of these ASCII dungeons, if you go down a different set of stairs, you end up in a sort of 25 level Sokoban puzzle challenge, where the only way to get to the exit of each level is by pushing the crates. So I think that was my first experience of that, and probably played quite a lot of that during that as well. I think the things that really got me into it first, again with the first person, was probably the Myst games. Sort of playing that on the family PC as a very young man, I was just obsessed, because it made me feel clever. I'm not gonna mince words. I like feeling smart, and that's what it did.
Did you play any of the remake of the Myst games?
Yeah, I did. I played. I think I played the remake.
They've remade them a couple of times now.
Yeah. I think I played the remake of Riven, and I played his new one, Obduction, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And really enjoyed that. And I was lucky enough, that came out just before I think I left games journalism, and I was lucky enough to interview him. He's a very interesting man, and I think I'm fascinated by the kind of minds that can design puzzles, like yours and his. I think it's just an incredible sort of skill. And particularly with those kind of big visual puzzles and things like that, I really struggle with that stuff. I have a thing called aphantasia, so I'm sort of mind's eye blind, so I can't imagine any pictures in my head. So I find that kind of act of being able to create those puzzles essentially adjacent to magic, really, along with being able to write music. So I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff, but I also just love simple systems driven things, right? Discovering new systems and learning how they work, particularly when you've got what is ostensibly a very simple system that kind of unfolds into that manifold complexity, as I think a few of the Draknek games do really, really well, just layering on various different interactions and rules to create a much more complex thing out of quite a simple structure is something I really enjoy. Getting a handle on the boundaries of those rule sets, I suppose, and then learning that you have to kind of break them and transcend them is always a really fascinating thing. And I think probably Portal and Portal 2 were the first time I really kind of got that idea of, you're supposed to kind of try and break this. It's not a play by the rules and color within the lines kind of game. It's do whatever you think might work. There's
definitely parts of Portal that's like, I'm going to put the portal on the portal-shaped hole in the wall.
Right. Yeah.
But,
yeah. I think I think that's the first, that the narrative as well, that lightheartedness, that kind of tongue-in-cheek brutality of it as well. I think it's, it is, as a product, it just holds together so well. I think in terms of individual puzzles, there were a few in there that were great. There was a few in there that were just a bit frustrating. But I think with the mise en scène and the general kind of feeling of that game, that's still one of the ones I will remember for until the day I die, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I feel like a consistent through line of the podcast has been how hard it is to market puzzle games.
Yeah.
And like this is a challenge that you're just now getting to grips with. So I think there'll probably be a really interesting conversation like 6 months from now where you're like pulling your hair out.
Yeah, podcast 2.
Why did you
done none of the things you
explain
promised?
that this is going to be this hard? But yeah, I'm curious. Like, you don't have a lot of like lessons learned yet, but like, what's your take on how to market things that are inherently like a little bit niche or a little bit off-putting?
Yeah, I think puzzle games are in quite a unique position for that because they have that nicheness, right? And I think they're still seen even within games as kind of a bit nerdy or a bit specialized. But then they also have that enormous broad mainstream appeal, right? Just the general idea of solving puzzles, of making yourself feel smart, crosswords, connect the dots, whatever you want to do, they're hugely popular, and it transcends pretty much every possible demographic, right? And there's very few identifying properties of a puzzle game lover other than the fact that they like playing puzzle games. And that makes it a huge pain in the ass to try and market, to be honest, because it's a tricky thing to try to find the kind of unifying principle for, to try and reach people. And really, the only thing you can work on is, you already like and play puzzle games. Okay, here's some more. But it does also mean that you can keep expanding that audience, and if you are able to build that kind of dedicated audience who knows that you're making good stuff and will come back every time for it, because they are quite a starved market. It's not a market with a huge amount of quality releases in it. You can build a very loyal audience as well. So that's the plan. I would like to step up a bit more on some of the community stuff and start trying to broaden that audience. See where we might be able to find new players and convert them into people who enjoy us as a brand, and that, as marketing speakers, made even me feel a little bit nauseous.
Nothing more than I like than people enjoying my brand.
Yeah, absolutely. That was at Christmas. A lot of people enjoyed my brand. Good times. Yeah. But yeah, it is a tricky genre, right? And I think all niches are quite tricky. But I think that aspect of having that almost universal appeal to a sort of fundamental human need in people, I think, of problem solving, right? We are problem solving creatures, and it's what we do socially, it's what we do for fun, it's what we do for work quite often. We're really good at it, and we're always looking for ways to make that more interesting and to interact with systems like that. And I think that's really fascinating, because I think anybody can be turned into a puzzle fan. It's quite difficult to get someone to the level where they will actively go out and seek that and become a puzzle nerd, I suppose. So it's kind of, you're working on two quite different levels, I think, with the marketing of reaching those really hardcore people who absolutely love it and will complete all of your optional special challenges day one and write to tell you how you really should have made it much harder. But you're also reaching the pensioners who just want something to sit and look at whilst they're sat on the porch, or kids who are playing on the bus or whatever. So it's
and
really
the marketing to those different audiences like completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because some of them you're trying to say this will absorb you and consume you, and it will be all you think about for 6 months, and you'll love it. And for some people, you're like, hey, you could play this while you're on the toilet. and that's it, right? And never think about it again. So yeah, a tricky one to read. Despite the fact that you are probably never going to find both ends of that market in the same place either. Bringing people into community is always good, but it's also there's a lot of competition for people's attention, and I think increasingly now people have also got a little bit more cautious about kind of joining a load of communities and signing up for discords and all this stuff, because it can become quite overwhelming. If you end up in a lot of them, the signal to noise ratio means it stops kind of being a useful way to gather information. So yeah, it's still something we're
how do you think people feel about email newsletters these days? Because obviously we've got ours, but
they've had a bit of a resurgence, I think. Yeah, I mean, I know there's been a few other, big ones started in games recently, particularly in the B2B space. But equally, I think there's kind of a resurgence of them generally. Everyone and his wife has got a Substack now. It seems to be the new kind of podcast alternative. I think you're not allowed to officially say you're a white man in his 40s unless you've got a Substack now instead of a podcast. But I think it's making a comeback, and I think it maybe sort of reflects a bit of that need to not necessarily be interacting all of the time with people and be able to just sit and read something about something you're particularly interested in. I think so many people, we are exposed to so many things and so many interests, and it's actually quite difficult to find time to really get into a specific thing, I think, because we're constantly pulled into so many different directions. So those people who really are into the puzzle side, we can hopefully serve them that. And then those people who just want to keep it a bit more casual, an email newsletter works for that as well, I think. But like all of these things, signups, getting signups is kind of tricky, and spreading the word can be kind of tricky. And with the best will in the world, most of the time, that most of what you write isn't going to get read either, which can be very depressing when you get those open reports. And I remember that when I first started working on the newsletter for gamesindustry.biz, which is, very successful, very, very well signed up for, and seeing that we'd got about a 30% open rate or something, and being absolutely devastated at first, thinking, God, what are we doing wrong?
That's good.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually really, really good. You should be pleased with that, So yeah, I try not to look too closely at the stats now, but I think it's a useful medium, definitely.
Do you have any tips for indie developers making niche puzzle games, for like how to get the word out a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've discussed even over the last month, is that increasingly, really, what you have to rely on in terms of PR is influencers and streamers rather than press, and I think that's maybe slightly less true for puzzle games than other types of games, because they don't always play as well on stream, right? And also
it's not because puzzle games will get better reception from traditional journalists. It's because it's tougher for streaming and YouTube and Twitch.
Yeah. So we don't get anything easy. We just get the easy bit made harder. So it's a tricky thing to find a streamer who will focus on that. But if you can, I think it's probably your best kind of option. And I think increasingly we're sort of seeing that games that have that kind of virality aspect, right, whether that is a weird unique mechanic, or whether that's a particularly strong character branding, or whether it's sometimes even just the person who's making it becomes the product themselves. I think we've seen a few of those kind of puzzle celebrities rise and fall, the varying degrees of good grace, and that can really help. But I think just getting it out there with some kind of unique factor is a big win in terms of getting it into streamers' hands. Because if you can immediately grab someone, the reality of the attention kind of market now is if you haven't got someone in the first 10 seconds, then they're gone. right? If you've got basically as long as they are forced to watch the YouTube advert for again to really hook them in, and if you haven't, then you're kind of screwed. So having something that's got that unfolds slowly, that starts with kind of simple rule sets and then gets bigger, can be really tricky for that, right? Because you have to sort of sit there and go through the bits that people know first. But something that's got a really eye-grabbing kind of mechanic, right? Something that's got that unique thing can be a really good way to start getting that exposure. The flip side of that is you can become a victim of your own success, because you can start to look like quite a one-note experience. If it's all about that particular kind of mechanic, then you can start to look like you haven't really got much else of a game there, or people can feel like they've already played it by the time it comes out because they've seen it so much. But I think obviously the best advice for any small indie publisher, any small indie puzzle developer is, come speak to us and we will publish and
we'll
market
solve
it
all your problems.
perfectly. Yeah, absolutely.
And we have infinite bandwidth, so don't worry about if we're already publishing some stuff. No, we can publish every puzzle game ever made.
Absolutely, and then you can be in the every puzzle game ever made bundle on Humble Bundle in 20 years' time.
Before we wrap up, do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I was wanting to ask about the process of puzzle design, actually, because as I say, it's always sort of fascinated me from things like RPG style or point and click style puzzles. A bit easier to understand how you go about that and go, okay, well, use the monkey on the waterfall or whatever, which really annoyed me in Monkey Island 1 when I was a kid. But the idea of creating kind of systems first and saying, right, we're going to base it on this, and then we're going to maybe introduce this other mechanic, that fascinates me, right? And the idea of building that complexity without destroying everything you've done, making sure that there's only like a single answer to the problem that you're setting as well, and that you haven't just missed another very easy solution. I have no comprehension about how that process works and what comes first and how that all gets put together and how much revision is. So I'd love your insight on that.
I mean, the answer to all of those component parts is kind of the same, which is just playtesting a lot. Like I generally don't even know if something is good until I've got it in front of people and I'm watching them have realizations. And I might think something's a bit boring, and then I watch somebody play. Oh, there's this nuance to it that I just hadn't realized that's the interesting part. Okay, great. And then got to watch hundreds of people find bad solutions to your puzzles so that you can fix those solutions and then make a new version, and that's got a different bad solution. To some degree, sometimes it's fine if there's multiple solutions as long as they all have the same bottleneck of like the interesting thing that level is about. There might be a few different ways of doing it, but every solution to the level involves doing that in some way, and that's often fine for me. But yeah, I don't have a good solution to like finding the unintended solutions that don't work the way I want, other than just like brute force, throw it at the wall, get people to play it until they find the problems. And in terms of like systems or like ordering of mechanics or how to rearrange things, a lot of that also comes from watching people play. And I think I said this on one of the podcasts in the last couple of months, but I don't remember which one. But like a lot of it is about developing this internal understanding of the player's brain and figuring out like, oh, I can make a puzzle and imagine the things that a average player is going to try in it, and the things that are going to be in their brain and the things that are not going to be in their brain, and therefore what they're going to try first and how I think they'll respond to it, and what they might not be actively thinking about. So they might struggle to make a like jump to do something specific. A lot of the time you need to like watch people to like do that, but some of the time I can like skip a step and go like, well, I think that this is going to be a problem area. And sometimes I'll do something about it immediately. And sometimes I'll like confirm that and like send it off to players and go, yeah, okay, well, I was hoping that was not going to be an issue, but it's an issue. So I'll do something there. But yeah, having a sense of how the players will think is one of the most valuable tools in my arsenal for like figuring out what the best way to introduce concepts to somebody is. Because like if I can see a bunch of people getting stuck on one level, that's like a data point. But really the important thing is understanding why lots of people are getting stuck on that level. Because once you understand the why, you have the tools to figure out how to teach them better the thing that they're missing. If you just know where the problem is, but not why they're struggling there, then you kind of don't have the information to solve the problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually, that idea of trying to understand how other people think. And I imagine that gives you great insight into the way you think compared to other people as well.
Oh, I'm not nearly that self-reflective.
That's a shame. But yeah, no, that is fascinating. Well, I suppose as a sort of addition to that, do you find that there are kind of clear cultural differences in the way that people approach puzzles or think about puzzles? Are there?
Interesting.
I've heard that people sort of multilinguists. I had a friend who was Italian and he spoke English perfectly. He spoke Turkish perfectly, I think, and he spoke Japanese perfectly. And he said that when he thought in different languages, he would think quite differently because of the structure of the language. He said Japanese was very good for kind of analytical stuff, for example. I wondered if there's any reflection in that, in the way people approach puzzles or the way that they think about things.
I have no idea. I've never tried bucketing my playtesters in a way that I'm like paying attention to any kind of through line there. Like obviously, like we'll always have playtesters who are like some will just breeze through a bunch of puzzles, and some like it's much more valuable to have playtesters who are more like average players. Like they like even people who don't play a lot of puzzle games. Like you'll get the most useful data from like the people who breathe through. Like, okay, well, did you solve that because it's easy or because you're smart or because you've played hundreds of games like this? Whereas since we are trying to make something that the average granny could pick up and have a nice time with, we're not like dumbing it down, but like we are like it's more important for me to have the idea of how that granny thinks than how the average puzzle game designer thinks, because that's the kind of person who it's most important to teach the concepts they're going to need. Whereas a lot of people who are like puzzle sickos, they're probably very capable of picking up tricks, even if you're not doing a great job of tutorializing everything that they need.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that shorthand in puzzle games as well, right? And I think that's in all games. It's fascinating to see, when you sit down to play a game with someone who just hasn't played any games or hasn't played a game for a long time, and you realize how much stuff that you pick up about a game just because you're used to it, right? What elements of the UI might do what, or how to do basic things. And I think
even level design, there's definitely a degree of learning to read a puzzle and go like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why is that thing there?
Yes, absolutely.
What does that thing being there allow me to do or prevent me from doing?
Yeah. Why has that wall got a little nubbin in it when none of the others have? That sort of thing. Yeah.
And I tend to like designing puzzles that are very elegant and streamlined, and like you boil them down to the smallest possible version of that idea, the one with the least red herrings, with the least greebles that aren't relevant to the puzzle. So which I think does help for that kind of like, okay, well, everything here is going to be relevant in some way. But a lot of people just aren't thinking about puzzles in that way. And it's a very difficult thing to teach them to think about that.
Yeah, and I think that again is a tricky balance to ride, right? Because part of the joy is that unprompted discovery, going, oh God, that works like that. Of course it does. Of course that's how this works. But then there's also the horrible frustration of going, this is a very limited set of possible moves. Like, something like a Sokoban, where you're like, there's only 3 or 4 things I can do here, and I can't make any of them work because you just haven't seen that one thing that sort of changes stuff. So letting people discover things on their own and feel smart and develop that kind of vocabulary, I suppose, whilst also keeping them interested enough to get to that point, is a really tricky balance.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Dan.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And I will. We love to be back here again with some more thrilling stories about my past.
And thank you for listening to the Draknek and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoisemusic.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandes. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.